Welcome to our episode of Reaching Minds, Thoughts for Our Life's Journey. Today, we're going to be focusing on into the stories, ideas, and people reshaping of how we live and work. We're going to be talking about Parenthood Advantage and what that means for us, something that touches all of us and guides us through our life's journey. But this isn't just about parenting tips and bedtime stories. My guests today are the brilliant co-authors of The Parenthood Advantage, a powerful book that flips the scripts on how we view working parents. We will be exploring fresh, meaningful insights about parenting, professional life, being managers, and our own personal growth. We'll talk about the untold strengths parents bring to the table, why society still undervalues them, and how we can build a world that supports, not sidelines, the people raising the next generation to come. So whether you're a parent, a manager, thinking about becoming one, or just want to rethink how we define success in parenthood, this conversation is for you. Let's dive in. I'd like to introduce Mark Kaplan and Mason Donovan, who are the managing director of the Dagoba Group, a global consulting firm advancing inclusive leadership, employee well-being, and organizational culture. I've known Mark and Mason for over, 15 years. And along with the Parenthood Advantage, they have also co-authored The Inclusive Dividend. Their work has been featured in the Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and the Fast Company. Mark and Mason live in New England, USA, and they have twins that they have brought into this world in the last year and a half. Welcome, Mark and Mason.
Thank you, Nita, for having us.
Thank you, Nita. It's great to be with you.
It's lovely to have you and have that connection again. I'd like to kick off, and Mason, maybe you could answer this. What inspired you to write The Parenthood Advantage? What was it, a moment in time you thought, I've got to put this idea together?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I have to say there wasn't any particular point. I think it was a journey that brought us here. So prior to having children, we, as you said, we are directors of the Dagoba Group, which works with engagement and inclusion and employee engagement. We also work on the side of wellness. So when you look at, when we talk about employee engagement and wellness, very often we would find within those conversations in corporations on parents and the struggles parents were having within to manage both lives, and also the gender imbalances that come with that, how it, a lot weighs more on the women than the men. So there's when you're looking at that, when you look at inclusion, there's a lot of issues that we were already discussing. And it's a big, for both the mother and the father, it's a big wellness challenge as well, especially in that first year. So we heard that, and it's one of these things that until you actually experience it, people can tell you all they want as much as they can until you experience it. I don't think you fully feel what it's like. We knew, okay, we're going to have, when we decided to have children, we're going to have those sleepless nights. We're going to go through and we'll work. We had everything planned, right? So I'm a type A personality. I had everything planned. The baby bag was packed months in advance. We had everything with our clients, know this is how we're going to manage it. And we're still going to be able to manage work at the same time because we got this, right? Mother Nature doesn't go to plan. I don't think Mother Nature is a type A personality. And and Mother Nature, like what happens, has decided that a son was going to be born early, quite a bit earlier than we expected. And so I got a call on a Sunday saying she's in labor. We're just going to have the baby within 24 hours. So here I am just scrambling. Meantime, Mark is with his father in Las Vegas, celebrating his father's birthday. And what happened is that we're throwing all these gears in place and had to leave the house during at the tail end of winter, managing that jumping out, getting there and thankfully I had the bag packed and some others go there. On the trip over there, I get a text, and Mark and I are furiously texting back and forth, and we need to be there in time. On the trip over there, I get a text that says, "Oh, wait, we think we'll have more time. It'll be a few days." So you're like, "Oh, okay, we can breathe now." And the reason I'm telling you so now, I'll pull in why I'm actually going through the story, because it gets us to this point. I land, lots of trouble with everything I reserved for where I was going to stay, fell through for one reason or another. I had to find another place at the last moment after a 7-hour flight. And I get there, I hit the bed at 11 p.m. And just as I put my head down at 11 p.m., we get a text from the doctor, 5 a.m. was going to be an emergency delivery. Oh. And I'm like, wow, this is coming. This is reality. This is happening. And so he was born early, and we always get emotional when we tell the story prematurely. And if anybody has had a premature child, you go in there, it's such a mixture of I'm so excited and I'm so scared at the same time. Hooked up to every tube, oxygen, monitors, everything beeping. His heartbeat's too high, it's too low, troubles with feeding, back and forth. You have all these issues. And they allow us to be in there between 8 and 8. So 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So we actually be there like 7:45, waiting for the doors to open. And then 8 p.m. we try to stagger ourselves out, wait until they force us out. But when we got back, we're like, wow, we still need to do emails. We still have workshops going. We still have clients to manage. And that time, I didn't realize how much emotion, how much of it was taken to get to that point, that we had everything planned, right? Mm-hmm. This was going to be we can manage this. But until we're in it and realizing how much you're investing, the emotional, the physical, the mental, and everything is on your child. Mm-hmm. But the business still has to run. And so when we're struggling with that, and luckily we're business owners, so it's made it a little bit easier on us, but at the same time, a little bit more difficult because we're still managing the entire business. As we will telling these stories and working, and the break times that we would get out of NICU because they had to change tubes and whatnot, so we had to leave the room. We'll be on our phone trying to manage the little bits of work we can get in between. We started noticing others doing the same thing, but these weren't business owners. There was people that had jobs and that they needed to report to, and started talking to them and talking to others and realizing, wow, there's such a lack of support corporately and planning corporately to manage, to help and support working parents. So we just started digging in, and we started talking to others and reaching out to clients. And we're talking to people who, when they told their manager they were going on leave, it basically was like telling them they were quitting, because that's what it felt like specifically for the women, because there is this cultural, and it still has today, there is this cultural sort of bias that's in there. That's it for the woman, that it's a professional pause or a professional ending. And then we'll talk about how it works for the men, but we realize it was not working. It's broken. There are a few companies that are doing really well, and we can count them on our hands. But the majority of companies, even the ones that really intend to do well, are missing out on so many steps, which we can talk to later. But that's how it's got that. We realize, wow, all of our work we've done on inclusion, on engagement, on wellness, this is the intersection. And this is one specific group that 80% of employees, 80% of your employees are or will become a parent within their career. So if you think about it, 80% of your employee base is going to become a parent. So that, just knowing that, and wow, that we need to fix this. We need to fix this at the corporate world. There's so much work to be done at the legislative level. All countries, U.S. in particular, because U.S. is so far behind U.K. and rest of EMEA, as well as many and many other countries when it comes to a legislative approach. But often we find corporations will get ahead of the legislation and understand that. So that's where we got it. So we just started having more interviews and talking. Then we started doing formalizing. We say, there's a need here. There's a book here. We need to write this. And that's how we got on this journey. I know it's a long story, but it's filled with emotions and a very personal, authentic experience, and then really a lot of practicality mixed in.
I think what I take away from that is a couple of words you used, which was one of managing. You thought you could manage this. And I guess the other thing is that organizations don't have a place where I think they allow for transition
Mm,
from when you're becoming a parent. What kind of support or the unexpected happens? Of course, life doesn't. And you'll find this more as you go along. Things don't always work out in a very linear way. And so, therefore, organizations are almost, I think what you're saying is almost playing dumb around this, that they're not taking into account the impact, I think, that happens
correct.
at the emotional level. So, in terms of the kind of core message in your book for managers or people becoming or considering becoming parents, what is the kind of message, Mark, do you think, in there?
What we're really trying to do is reframe the conversation from one in which companies were thinking about parenthood as a problem to be managed, like a challenge, something that was negative, into something that's actually an opportunity because the experience of becoming a parent is like a skill development laboratory, right? Like, if I think about it personally, my skills since becoming a parent have increased in ways that I didn't expect. And I think we find, and this really showed up in the research we did, and particularly the interviews we did, that that's often the experience of parents, right? You become a better time manager. You become more effective at what you're doing. You become and develop more resilience. We heard this a lot, and we didn't necessarily think that we were going to hear as much of this, but people become more empathetic often. And they describe themselves as more empathetic because the experience of being a parent requires empathy, right? You got to look at the world through the experiences and the eyes of these little kids. And you begin to be able to extend that to other people. So we just found that this is an incredible opportunity. It's not like companies had bad intentions in most cases, right? It's just they weren't managing this with the notion that this is a transition that's potentially really great for everybody. It's a win-win here for the parents, actually a win, the parents, the child, and the organizations that they're a part of. And so we really wanted to move it in that direction in some practical ways that are informed by obviously real experiences and research.
So, what I want to build on is a couple of questions. What are some of the overlooked skills that parents naturally develop that transfers into leadership and team settings that you can say more explicitly? You were talking a little bit about how time management. Are there other things that get developed during the course of going into parenthood?
I think I'll say a little bit more and maybe I'm sure Mason will
Yeah.
have some things to add. Just the way you make decisions, right? The way you think about important events that are happening, right? The decision-making process is multifaceted. I know for myself, and we heard this from the people we talked to, right? You think in a bigger sense. You make your decisions more informed by a bigger context, right? You tend to think more strategically because with kids, you're thinking ahead always, but you're also dealing right in the moment. If there's one thing that kids do is they put you right in the moment. I think the skill of
Yes.
just being present, which in the world we live in with the distractions, the addictions to our phone, the devices, just the skill of being present. Our kids demand that of us, right? You're learning these things, and it's not just because you're choosing to learn them, it's because they're essential. Risk management, right? I think about risk totally differently because I try to anticipate environmental risks for my kids, long-term risks. I plan for their development, right? What can they handle now? In what direction are we trying to help them develop, right? All of that stuff, which I think when you're a member of a team or you're a manager of people, these are essential skills. And I'm just finding that I'm using them more and more. And
Yeah.
the people we interviewed said similar things.
Mason, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's sometimes people think, what can you bring from changing diapers into the workplace? And it's not the actual task we're looking at, right? It is the underlying sort of soft skills that are happening. So, for example, when you're managing tantrums, and especially if you have multiple children, you look at that, your technique, how you're using that, the amount of patience you have and what you're doing to result in a good outcome on that and learning. Guess what? We're managing conflicts of people all the time in our organizations. Right. So the same underlying skills work and apply. Obviously, you have a different audience, but you're using the same skills. Resilience. You have to have so much resilience as a parent because there's so many things thrown at you that you don't know. And even if you do know, it's tough. And you build that. The same thing with organization. Things are not going to happen the way you expect them to happen a lot of times. You need to have that resilience. So it's the soft skills that are being transferred. For me, as I said earlier, I'm a type A personality. I had very low empathy skills. And I probably had low patience as well, as Mark could probably note. Because this is the way we're supposed to do it. Let's do it. Come on. What are we waiting for? Kids don't work that way. We try to put a schedule in place, but their schedule, especially anybody who's become parents, the schedule changes almost hourly for the first 3-4 months. And you try to get a sleep schedule. You're like, oh my God, for 2 days they've done this. And then they change the feeding, prepping. So when you look at the patience starts to build up, you can breathe and understand. And the skill sets you use, and we also talk about skill sets that you learn and work, you can apply within the household as well. So that ability of skills, like we work with companies about on the wellness about just taking a breath, breathe, just 1 minute. So that works really well. If you're just so frustrated and things are just not going right with the kid, put them in a safe place and go and breathe for 1 minute. The child will be fine. You need to recapture. So you can transfer some of the skills to the other side as well. And what we're talking about is that you don't need to become a parent to get these skills. But when you become a parent, you're pushed into this boot camp, whether you want it or not. And what you take out of it, there's opportunities. And we want parents going into realizing there's things that I'm going to learn along the way. There's things I'm going to have. You're not losing, right? You're not losing, you're gaining. If you look at it as you're gaining, then you'll look at where you can pull out and where you can leverage. And we want corporations to see that as well. We want to see what are you gaining from this person become a parent and what they're going to go through the next 3 months. Now, you can send your employees to a leadership management session and they can go to 3 months of leadership school. Not all of them are going to come back being great leaders, right? Mm-hmm. But you gave them that opportunity. So not all parents are going to leverage this, but they have this huge opportunity, especially if they look at it and if they're supported by organizations to pull these skill sets, these soft skill sets. Maybe they're improving what they already have, or ones they, like myself, didn't have as much of, and transferring that back. But it's all about the way we see it and the way we really perceive becoming a parent and how that makes us a better person. Now, Nita, we asked this we've done over a couple hundred interviews. And if you were in a cafe and a line in the grocery store or a restaurant, and we overheard you about being a parent, or we saw that you were looking like you're going to become a parent or had a baby, we would ask you, if you've already become a parent, and I'm going to ask this to you, Nita, did it make you a better person? And did it make you a better employee? So I'm going to ask you that because we've asked that to everyone we interviewed.
I think it made me a more expansive person in terms of the repertoire that I had. What I learned was how good at multitasking I was and how flexible I had and how very naturally, unlike my husband, I could think, oh, okay, what do I need? I need X, Y, and Z. And to be honest, 25 years later, I've converted that to our dog. So our dog gets all of it. And my husband goes, how do you do it? I said, because it comes naturally to me. Did it make me, I think it took some time through my own kind of vulnerability. And like you, I've worked for myself. So there was a sort of crunch point whereby letting that go, I can't generate an income because I've just had a baby, and really letting that kind of identity go, that just because I wasn't earning as much didn't mean that I couldn't be independent. So I think there was a sort of a transition that I went through in terms of my own core identity, because you do develop soft skills. You go from a 2 relationship to a 3 relationship, and then you got responsibility for this human being, and you go, oh shit, I've got this here. So I think it does. It does. And of course, I made lots of mistakes along the way.
We all
And
do.
one of the questions I wanted to ask you was when you were interviewing all these people, were in the research or the interviews, were there any surprises that you thought, oh, we've never considered that? Mason.
Oh, sure. I can say that the first surprise when we started doing it was how raw and emotional all these stories and how much that point in your life really, especially with your organization, whoever you're with, who supported you during that point in your life, cemented for the rest of your life. Yeah. Those are, and there's friends and family who showed up there, who really supported you. That will be with you for the rest of it because it's such an important part of your life. It's such, as you talked about, your identity is transforming at that point. There's so much going on, and you feel so vulnerable. You feel like an imposter. That imposter syndrome. You feel like an imposter as a parent. You feel like an imposter as an employee because you feel like you can't be great at either. But what we found is that it was raw and emotional for me, but when we started talking how it was for everyone else, and if their company supported them and they had a great manager, they were connected to that company and manager for the rest of their life, right? For good or bad, they were there, they're less likely to be poached. But if they weren't there, if they weren't being supported by the manager, and the number one reason for people who come back after leave or don't and leave within a year, because that's typically if you're going to leave, you're going to leave within a year.
Yes.
The number one reason is the manager. The lack of support during that time. And so that was, I think, was surprising for me how deep and connected that made you during that period. So, Mark, if you had something else you wanted to add.
It was really the reaction to me. Because when we started doing this research, we hadn't fully developed our ideas. We knew generally where we wanted to take the book, but we weren't sure what people were going to say. And one of the things that struck me is when you would ask new parents, what did you learn and how did you grow from this experience of becoming a parent? It was a question. It was like you paused when Mason posed it to you. What was surprising was that I don't think we ask that question very much.
No.
And when people start to talk about it, it was amazing what emerged. And it's almost like they hadn't really fully reflected on how did I develop? What did I learn that makes me, as you said, a more expansive person? And when people started to talk about that, a lot came out. I didn't think empathy was going to be one of the skills that we described until later in the process when a few of the interviewees started to say, I remember one woman in particular who was very hard driving in the tech space. And I'm asking her that question. She paused before she answered. And then she starts talking and a bunch of stuff is coming out. I think I'm a better manager now. And then she paused and she said, I think I'm a better manager because I'm more understanding of my team. She said she talked about how before she was a parent, when a parent would come in and say, oh, I have to leave at 4:00 today because I've got a doctor's appointment. And she said, sometimes I would sit there and go, oh yeah, you've got a doctor's appointment, right? Maybe you just want to leave at 4:00. She said, now I'm a parent. She said, and I'm the one who's saying I need to leave for an appointment. She said, and it's really an appointment, right? I'm not making it up. And she said, so I think I'm more empathetic. And so for me, I was really delighted, honestly, and a bit surprised about what emerged from that question. And it's one that when you think about wellness and when you think about integration and managing that boundary between work life and personal life, like we really need to rethink this. And I think we are in some ways, right? I don't think we're at ground zero on this, right? But that experience, there's not a lead or steel door between our personal life and our companies, really. We're the same people. So I think that was surprising to me in a very positive way.
So do you think there are, in terms of parenthood, there are some myths that we would need to debunk?
I think, Mason, you'll probably have more. I'm the type B personality, the one who's all over the place. Mason's the type A. That still is true, although I would say, and hopefully Mason has noticed, my skills have gotten a little bit better in terms of organization.
I think the biggest myth that's out there is that becoming a parent makes you less of an employee.
I think
less of a person. And that's seen all the time. It's seen very subtly. And so I can give you an example, and it's often not overt. And that's where inclusion, like all of our work in inclusion biases comes back, because a lot of stuff is happening back here, right? In the back of your head. For example, give a typical story. The woman's going in to let the manager know that she's going to have a child. She's very excited about the child. Often she's very fearful of telling the manager. They wait until she typically wait until she's past a certain point to make sure she's going to be having this child, at least physically sure.
Yes.
And then when she tells the manager, typically will say, "Oh, congratulations, so happy for you." And then there's a space they can see back here. And the mind of the manager is, "Oh God, who am I going to have replace her? She's going to come back. What do I need to do? She's obviously, I had her for a promotion, so that's not going to work. And yeah, so I just need to do." And then the manager sends you to HR. Okay, fantastic, so happy. Like, contact HR. This is great. And the moment that woman leaves the room, the door shuts. They lean back and like, oh, and they have this feeling like, I have a problem now. I have to fill this area. They don't see it. And so that's the gist of this book, right? So the gist of this book, the really core element of this book is to have that paradigm shift. When somebody sits down with you, whether it's the mother or the father, whoever it is sitting down and saying, I'm going to become a parent. You still get genuinely happy for the person, but instead of all that stuff I just talked about in the backyard, the thing that's back in your head now is, oh my God, I'm going to have a much more skilled person. I'm going to have an opportunity, somebody that's going to be greater. If we support them, they're going to have longer tenure with us. They're going to be better connected to this company. I can lean on more in the future. They're going to have a lot to bring. If that's what's going on. So often we talk about the Pygmalion effect. For those who are not familiar with it, it's basically what we expect of someone will do things unconsciously to bring about that expectation. So the way that the conversations happen now, that first one I talked about, when the mother comes in and says, I'm going to have a child, the expectation is she's less of an employee now. And you'll do things unconsciously. Stop giving her assignments. Stop offering her, making decisions for her that in best of intent to give her space and room that will slowly start to erode her career path, which then eventually makes her leave, which fulfills that, what your expectations are. Opposite way, looking the other side, and you're thinking, wow, a great employee, you're going to start to do things. Hey, we have this great opportunity. Would you like to have it? This will bring... It changes that paradigm. And that's what this book is about. So we not only want the manager, so we're writing it for the manager and the working parent. We want that manager to have that mindset, but we also want the employee becoming parent also have that mindset, because you can self-defeat as well and realize you have an opportunity to be a better person, which we all talked about, and a better employee if this is managed right and supported right and led. So that is really that myth that's still out there. And we can talk about it very openly and people but it's still back here. It's still happening because companies are not training the managers. They're not training their employees on what's taking place here. And they're not providing that coaching. Some are, but the majority are not, and not providing that guidance that we talk about within the book.
My question to that is, why not? Why are there roadblocks to this? Because we can clearly see the benefits both for the parents who's becoming and for the organization to shift in mindset. What do we have to do in order for that to occur, do you think?
I mean, I think the part of what's complicated about this, and I know something about organizational change, is that you have to drive change at multiple levels, right? We heard a lot of examples of companies where the policies had become more inclusive, more effective, I think more, even in some cases, more progressive. But that didn't necessarily translate down to the managers, right? One example of this is a lot of companies have become much more open to fathers taking full leave and encouraging it in the policy approaches. But then when men start to go down that route, what they're seeing two things. One is they're not seeing a lot of senior level role models who are doing it. And we heard some stories of this in the interviews that we did with men, was that when they mentioned that they wanted to take more than just a week or two, like they wanted to take a full leave, and they were very creative about it. I'm going to take a couple of months. My wife's going to take a couple of months, and we have this hope. They found that it was seen they didn't get a very good reception, let's say,
No,
and they
no.
perceived a sense of something potentially lost in their career. That wasn't always happening. In many cases, there's what we call a fatherhood bonus, right? In a lot of cases, men, particularly when they conform to the traditional stereotypes of the male in the relationship, they get a bonus,
Yeah.
actually, and it's a literal bonus in terms of money. But in this case, we also found that men who wanted to use these new policies, they really hesitate to do it. So you're trying to drive change at the policy level, which in some cases is easier. But then you've got to drive change at the cultural level inside the organization, the day-to-day behaviors of managers, and then you've got to support individuals. So that's a complicated process and it takes a while. And we think that we're in the middle of that process. And this book is designed to give a push to these sorts of change efforts, to get organizations to think about how do we drive, what do we need to be doing at all of these levels, right? At the policy level, but also what do we need to teach managers? How do we coach managers to be effective with their 80% of their people are going to become parents at some point during their career? How do we then also coach individuals to be proactive, to develop plans, all the things that we lay out in the book more specifically?
I
I,
remember one of the gentlemen I was interviewing, and he told his manager he would like to take they allowed for a bonding leave of 8 weeks. So it's great. He was planning. He didn't even think it was because it was so promoted within the company. And so, oh, we offer this. It's on their website. It's something. And he told his managers, "Hey, yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to take these 8 weeks." And the manager looked at him and said, "What?
you're
You're
crazy.
taking 8 weeks?" And his manager literally said to him, "You need to get your priorities straight."
Yeah.
And think about that. Your priorities. And that's at least the manager was upfront saying it, because a lot of times they don't say it's back here. And that gentleman now is derailed. So, oh, not committed anymore. But what should be our priority be? Should it be raising our child and making sure that they're healthy? And there's so many studies out there in that first 12 weeks that if the parents are there, how it has a long-term effect on the health, the emotional, and the mental wellness of that child. There's all types of studies globally on that, to have that time. But where should our priorities be? And when he told me that, I was just thinking our organizations need to get their priorities straight. What's
Yes.
going to make a better employee? Ones in which you're saying, oh yeah, take a few days off, but then come back and start working because this is your career path. The ones are more flexible. We understand, let's see what we can do. There's important things that you're managing right now, and that might be a bit of strain, but let's work with it so it's not. Let's work with so you have that bonding time. What can we do? Let's set our strategy and a plan. So when no balls are dropped, and when you come back stronger and you just have an overall better experience. Those two different responses creates and so that gentleman, he was talking about a prior employer, he left. He said, I left within seconds in my mind. The moment the manager, and this was a up and rising star with the organization, he contacted another organization the next day and said, hey, this is what's happening. And that next organization, come here tomorrow. We will give you those 8 weeks the moment you start.
That's
And then
amazing,
you come on.
actually. I was thinking about what you were saying, and it sounds to me the word that popped into my mind is that people need to be given maybe it's something like permission that it's okay to shift things, to have a different expectation. And it's a great example that you're giving, that this individual said to this person, I'm going, and somewhere else is more open to it.
Yeah.
So I think from my perspective in the UK, I think the policies there, I think translating that into a practice is a bit patchy still. We probably do it better than the US. We do allow parental leave and longer parental leave. I still think the transition of becoming a parent is not managed well. I think there isn't the support or the go away and have this experience and come back and we will open you with welcome arms. I don't think it's quite there in many ways still. It might be there in some organization, I don't know. So I guess to that end, what do both of you, perhaps having written this amazing book, The Parenthood Advantage, what do you hope to see perhaps in the next 3 to 5 years around this area?
We would like to see companies have a more intentional and structured process. It's not going to be the same for every single parent, right? But to have a process where you sit down, we talk about 3 stages in the book: nesting, which is those few months just before the child is born; the 4th trimester, which are the first 3 months, and we all know what that's, right? That's a pretty intense period. And then returnship, which doesn't always happen after 3 months, but if you think about that as a phase. So we think this process should be thought through and intentional and actually mandated by the company. If you're a manager, Nita, and I come to you and say I'm having a child, then what you should do is initiate a conversation with me about, okay, let's think about this process. Let's plan for it. What do you envision? How do you envision your time away? What kind of communication do we want to have? What should the transition look like? And this may change over time. One of the things we heard from more and more parents as we interviewed them, and then we started to test it a little bit, was that a lot of parents, it's not like you flip a switch one day and you're gone, and then 3 months later you flip another switch and you walk back in the door just like it was before. A lot of parents talked about how what would have been really great is maybe there's a few weeks of transition back, and you plan for it. Hybrid for a little while, maybe in the office or working part-time for a little while until you work yourself back up. It's much more humane, much better for the parent, I think much better for the organization in terms of being able to plan for that process. So we would like to see a more proactive, maybe even mandated process when someone is becoming a parent. Now, there's some more ideas we have as well, but that to me is at the core of this.
I love the 3 steps that you have, which follows from the inclusion dividend, which is brilliant, actually. Mason, last few words before we sign off.
Yeah, it's, as Mark says, we want companies to be consciously inclusive for working parents. Understand as the majority of your employees. We also want working parents or soon to be parents to realize they need to own this as well. Just like you need to own your career, you need to own your leave, you need to own your returnship. If the company's not there to support you, if you don't see it there, they don't have a manager, if your manager's not the best in supporting you, reach out to others that gone through the process. Help yourself, help your manager walk through that. We're there to help companies set up that system so you don't have to do that on your own, but realize that you're going to be a better person. You're going to go through a lot. But there's so much. Look at this with the positive sense. You're not losing, you're gaining. This is not a professional pause. This is a leadership accelerator if we allow it to be. So we want companies to see that. We want individuals to see that. And we want this conversation to change from that initial, hey, this is a pause or a stoppage career, to this is, wow, this is great. This is what we're looking for. We have so many opportunities now and to move forward. So really a big paradigm shift.
I think what you're also, if I wrap it up, it's having maybe a growth mindset around this rather than a very kind of narrow mindset about, and not letting our amygdala part of our brain, which is full of, as we know, stereotypes and assumptions, get in the way of it. Thank you so much for the conversation, and I've learned a lot through all your kind of research and made me think a little bit about my process myself, which was a long time ago. And I'm sure people will find your book on Amazon.
On Amazon, it comes out October 14th is when it officially launches. If they go to the parenthoodadvantage.com, they can find the book launch page on there and see podcasts such as yours, Nita, be listed up there, as well as ways to pre-order or to order the book when it comes available.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nita. It's been a pleasure.
If you're interested in working with me, connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or www.nitasharma.com. And if you enjoyed the podcast, why not consider subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you have access to your podcast, and leave a review.